Very good afternoon to you. It's just gone 12 noon. Welcome to the week ahead. We are coming to you live from our SABC News studios right here in Auckland Park. We take you to this story. The 95 Libyans are currently boarding their flight, which is about to leave. We are taking you to the Kruger International Airport, where the 95 Libyans are being deported this afternoon. It's happening now. The 95 Libyans were processed from yesterday this afternoon. SABC News reporter Tumelo Machoka has been on the story, and we go live to him now. Tumelo, very good afternoon to you. We are seeing the live visuals of the 95 Libyans boarding the flight, which is headed for Benghazi in Libya. Good afternoon, Tumelo.
Good afternoon to you. Also, these men are already boarding the plane. We understand that this is the last group and the final group that will be boarding the plane. They've been boarding this plane since about 9 o'clock this morning. This is the last group now that is actually entering the plane. We understand after this, these men now, the plane will disembark and also go straight to Libya. So that is the last group of the men that have been were arrested in July and appeared in court for the contravention of the Immigration Act. Very jovial. I went to see the men on the other side of the airport. They were shaking my hand, saying that they are excited to be leaving the country. One of them was injured. He is on a wheelchair, so he is the one that is also at the back of the line. So he will be taken into the plane. Also, Sebenzile just now. So this is the last group that is expected to leave the country this afternoon, rather, to go to Benghazi. They arrived here. The first group arrived at the airport just after 4 a.m. in the morning, and the last group just arrived about an hour ago. When they arrived here at the airport, they were processed. Now they are now just entering the plane. That is the last group of men who have been in the country since April at that suspected military camp just outside White River. We understand that the police are continuing with their investigation, especially regarding the owner and their trainer or at that suspected military camp, rather, just outside White River. But the story now that we have, or now what we've been hearing also from the Home Affairs Department, is that they did release a statement, Home Affairs Minister Dr. Leon Shriver, saying that this plane and also the expenses of this exercise, especially this plane, will be paid by the Libyan government. So the expenses will be covered by the Libyan government. So that's the last group. They have already entered the plane. So any minute now, that plane will be leaving South Africa, going straight to Benghazi. Sebenzile.
Tumelo, yesterday when we were on air, we were under the impression that they were meant to be heading out yesterday. Give us a sense of what transpired. Were there any delays with processing them, and that they're only leaving today?
Yes, indeed. Yesterday we were at the airport since in the morning until late in the afternoon, because we did get information that they were going to be flying yesterday around 2:30, but they did not fly then. But we understand that due to the number of these men and also the processes that they have to undergo through just before they can actually be processed and get out of the country, that process took a while with the Home Affairs officials that were processing these men since yesterday. So that's why that process took a while. Even this morning when they were coming here, they were bringing them in groups. So they had to bring them in groups because there are a lot of them. So about 30 in one truck and about another 30 in another truck, and they had to bring them in batches, because you could imagine, and also they have to have a lot of police presence around these men, because it's a lot of them. So they don't know what will transpire if they bring them all at once, and that's why they are also bringing them into the plane in groups, in small groups and batches, because they don't want to bring all of them all at once at the same time. And also I think they're worried about crowding the airport. You understand the airport is also operating, and it's Saturday. A lot of planes are landing here, especially on a Saturday. The plane will be they will be closing the doors very soon, and then these men will be flying straight to Benghazi.
It is a very small airport, the Kruger Mpumalanga International Airport there, Dumelo. You mentioned just a moment ago that the expenses will be carried by the Libyan government. How involved have they been since the discovery of this military training camp, since the point of these 95 Libyans being arrested? They appeared, of course, in the course there were issues around translation and language. Now, of course, we're at the point where they are traveling back to Benghazi, to Libya. But how involved have the Libyans been throughout this entire process?
Well, in the second appearance, when these men appeared in court, there was a representation, a rep from the embassy, from the Libyan embassy that was in court. And also in the last appearance, there was also somebody from the Libyan embassy who was also in court. We understand that they will be flying with a Libyan representation. Somebody from the embassy also this afternoon when this flight is going to Benghazi. So there is somebody with from the Libyan government that is going to be flying with these men back to Benghazi.
Give us a sense of the police presence or any officials who are around as well. I mean, we can, of course, see you are a bit far, and we're able to see the aircraft just behind you. We're able to see the last group board that plane as well. But in terms of activity related, of course, to this particular group at the airport?
Well, indeed, there is a lot of police presence here, but we are on the other side because we cannot be on that side due to because this is the only vantage point that the airport management said we must be here, but not to go to that side. We can just only go there to see the men, but we cannot go there with our cameras. Our cameras are only allowed to be at this vantage point, but there is a lot of police presence here. There is a lot of also Home Affairs officials that are here from immigration side to actually try and help these men to be processed as soon as possible. But there is a lot of police presence and a lot of Home Affairs officials that are here at the airport just to ensure that there is a smooth transition, and these men can also just go to the plane and also just leave the country as soon as possible. But there is a lot of police presence here, and there's always been a lot of police presence. You know, since the arrest of these men, there was a lot of police that were on the ground when these men were arrested, and every time we go to court, there will always be a lot of police presence just to bring them. You know, they would bring them in 3 trucks, and every day that will be like a lot of police actually escorting them. And also even this since the early hours of this morning, since from 4 o'clock, when one truck would come here, it will come with a lot of police police members, especially from the public order police that have also been helping with the process of deportation of these men.
Dumelo Machogo, thank you very much for your time with us this afternoon. Dumelo is at the the Kruger Mpumalanga International Airport. You would have seen the last group of the 95 Libyans boarding that flight, which should be on its way any minute now. Some of them arrived yesterday at that particular airport. They were processed. It took some time, but everybody is now on that aircraft, and that flight is destined for Benghazi, Libya. We'll keep following that story. To this now, ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa will lead a visit by the party's National Working Committee, the NWC, to KwaZulu-Natal to meet with party structures in the province to assess the election results. The ANC lost its majority in that province, receiving just over 17% of the vote. The ANC is now the 3rd biggest party after the MK Party and the IFP. For more on this story, let's now cross live to SABC News reporter Ayanda Mhlongo. Ayanda, very good afternoon to you. Give us a sense of what's happening there. Has the president and his party's delegation arrived there as yet?
So, a very good afternoon to you. Good afternoon to our viewers at home. Yeah, we are still waiting for the ANC president, who you understand is on his way here to the City Hall in Pietermaritzburg. Of course, the city of Pietermaritzburg falling under the ANC's Moses Mabhida region. Well, some leaders of the ANC in the province of KwaZulu-Natal, in fact, should I say, the most, have arrived here at the City Hall, of course, accompanied by the leaders of the regions. But I guess it's important to mention that the president is leading the leadership of the National Working Committee, rather, of the African National Congress. The top 7 leaders are divided or in different regions across the 11 regions of the province to meet with the structures from the branches to the regional executive committees, as well as to meet their deployees in government or the officials that they have deployed to the local municipalities, of course, to assess the ANC's performance post the elections. It's a difficult visit, I'd say, having spoken to the ANC earlier on, the ANC secretary in the province of KwaZulu-Natal, Sebenzile, earlier on, saying that it's not easy, of course, for them after that a defeat at the election, which reduced the ANC from the majority party here in the province of KwaZulu-Natal to now the third biggest party, obtaining just over 17% of the election results. And of course, this important for the party as they now have to analyze the results and then come up with a way forward for them. Firstly, what is going to be important, and this is what the ANC has said to us, is they need to do an assessment of the branches. You'd know that the Mkhonto Wesizwe party has come in and hurt the ANC in terms of a number of ANC members that have crossed over to the Mkhonto Wesizwe party. So that's one the thing that the party has to look at, is that they're assessing their branches, and then of course they now have to look at the performance of the ANC in their respective municipalities where they are still governing. There were a number of challenges that the ANC was dealing with, a myriad of challenges that they're dealing with ahead of the elections. Issues of service delivery was one of the biggest challenges in terms of dysfunctional municipalities as well, and that's aside from the support that was declining here in the province. So these are things that the ANC has said is going to be quite important for them to discuss as they now sort of come together on a way forward in terms of what is now going to happen for them. The Secretary of the ANC in our conversation earlier mentioned, of course, that they must acknowledge and accept that the Jacob Zuma factor did hurt them, that they underestimated former President Jacob Zuma and his Mkhonto Wesizwe party, but they now believe that the fact that they have now dealt with the Jacob Zuma matter, in the sense that former President Jacob Zuma has now been officially expelled from the ANC, that's a chapter that they now want to close, and they now want to focus on rebuilding the organization. So that is the work that the National Working Committee is here to do. Of course, Sebenzile, there has been mixed reaction on the ground from ANC branch members in terms of a number of things and how the party handled the MK matter and other organizational issues that they're going to have to deal with. The ANC is now under a part of the government of provincial unity, or the GPU here in the province of KwaZulu-Natal, and that is also something that some party members, or at least at branch levels, had said that they did not agree with. So that's also something that the party leaders are going to have to deal with, and they have said that they still have the job of going down to their branches and to speak to their supporters on the decision that they took to form part of the GPU. So these are all the issues that the ANC is going to be unpacking, and then of course the NWC tomorrow will then come together with the Provincial Executive Committee. They will then be meeting in Durban, and the party will then come up with sort of a plan to move forward and what's ultimately going to happen here in the province of KwaZulu-Natal. One would remember, Sebenzile, that last year around April, the National Working Committee did visit the province of KwaZulu-Natal, and a decision was taken thereafter. And this, of course, was ahead of the elections. They were preparing for the elections. One of the decisions that was taken at that time was that the party was going to deploy additional members of the National Executive Committee to assist the province in the preparations for the conference. But also at the time, a big talking point was around disbanding the province of KwaZulu-Natal. There were some calls that the leadership of the party, and this was based on the performance at local government level and the there was discussions amongst the ANC, with some people feeling that the leadership of this province has failed the ANC and therefore should be disbanded. Those talks are now back on the table. There are still people who are saying that this leadership of the ANC, led by Siboniso Duma, who is the chairperson, Begum Tolo, who is the secretary of the province, this leadership is the leadership that has failed the ANC, and they have brought the ANC in the province to just above 17%, and we are hearing people that are now saying they need to bring that discussion back on the table, that the ANC in this province should be disbanded. And so I suppose that is also another discussion that the NWC will have to deal with, whether or not they see this current leadership of the ANC as a leadership that has failed the ANC. You'd note that, of course, the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal, very, very important in terms of the bigger picture. They have the biggest numbers of the ANC. It's the biggest province. It has the biggest membership nationwide, so the outcomes of this election, despite all the effort that was put in by the ANC's National Executive Committee, that was led by the president, seemingly they didn't get the results they had envisaged. The president himself, with notice ahead of the elections, probably visited KwaZulu-Natal more than any other province in an attempt or in an effort to try and garner more support for the party. But despite all that, the results were not what the party had hoped for. So we are waiting. Samandeli, you'd see behind me here that there has been some branch members of the ANC have started to arrive. So in terms of the plan, what is going to happen is that the NWC members, led by the President's office, going to meet with the leadership of the region. Thereafter, the second session will then be the President and his team will then be meeting with the structures or the branches to get an assessment on the ground from the branches in terms of what happened, what caused this a defeat, one would say, for the ANC, and where to from here. So a very, very important visit, one would say, for the ANC, not only, of course, here in the province of KwaZulu-Natal, but also an important visit for the ANC nationally. Sebenzile?
The dust may have somewhat settled now post the May 24 elections, and as much as the party is looking to reflect on what went wrong after receiving a hammering, really, in the all-important KwaZulu-Natal, they also have to be forward-looking in their discussions, because now the focus is on the 2026 local government elections. How quickly are they likely to get to that point that deal, of course, with the pain of the big blow of the May elections, but very quickly adjust, mobilize, and plan for an all-important 2026?
You've hit the nail on the head, Sebenzile. They really do not have much time. In fact, Begum Tolo did allude to that whilst they need to quickly assess their performance, but what is important for the party now is to look at the way forward and their preparations for the next local government election. So no doubt it's going to form part of the discussions that are going to take place here today. It is going to be important. Something has to happen in terms of what the province. Do they keep this current leadership of the ANC? Is the leadership that is going to now take them to the 2026 local government election? Are they going to be bringing in additional support once again for the ANC in terms of maybe additional members of the National Executive Committee to come and be based in KwaZulu-Natal and to assist the province? These are all the, I suppose, the talking points that the leaders are going to be discussing. But certainly, that is one thing that they have confirmed, that what they need to do now is focus on the local government elections.
SABC News reporter Ayanda Mhlongo coming to us live from the City Hall in Durban. They were expecting the President Cyril Ramaphosa, wearing his party leader hat this afternoon, to be arriving in KZN for that NWC. We'll cross back to Ayanda as soon as there's more movement there. Let's turn our attention now to stories that are making headlines this Sunday. Joining us this afternoon is Dr. Thomas Tadelo, Tatelo, Senior Lecturer of Political Communications and Media Studies in the Department of Communication Science at the University of South Africa, UNISA. Thank you very much for your time with us this afternoon, Doctor. Let's start with the Sunday Times this afternoon, and the focus is still on that fallout. The now former Deputy President of the Economic Freedom Fighters resigning earlier this week. The Sunday Times this afternoon is leading with what is behind the fallout, behind the big fallout, why it is that Shivambu left the EFF. They're saying there that the resentment began during the GNU negotiations.
Well, the so-called fallout, it has long been coming. Since last year, we've seen Mr. Shivambu spending quite number of his time in KZN, where he was kind of establishing a partnership between the EFF and President Zuma, former President Zuma. And surprisingly, that fallout has essentially gone wrong. It was a partnership that was meant to undermine President Ramaphosa, and the winner in this scenario, for the most part, is the MK, and the EFF stands as a loser by Mr. Shivambu leaving the EFF. And on the other hand, I would say the departure of Mr. Shivambu from EFF is essentially a blow to the leftist politics in South Africa, where we live in a country where there's so much unemployment, high levels of poverty, and so on. And one would expect that leftist politics would become much more stronger and to challenge the status quo that has been established by the likes of the ANC and so forth.
The Times, Dr. Tatelo, also says here that one of the issues was that Malema would have scuppered Floyd's chances of potentially becoming Deputy Finance Minister. They're also reporting here that Malema contacted President Ramaphosa directly, trying to make a play for the second Deputy President of the country. Again, seemingly here that there was some backstabbing, if you will, or Malema perhaps trying to set himself up and leaving the rest of the party behind, or at least leaving Shivambu out of what he was trying to plan for himself.
Well, I'm not too sure whether Mr. Malema is prepared to leave the EFF, given his personality and the type of his leadership. And the recent election outcomes is a clear indication of his leadership style and issues, political issues that the EFF has been campaigning about, and the type of rhetoric that he has been using. In my view, I think it's kind of tired. It's an old rhetoric that needs someone who could rebrand the EFF going forward.
All right, let's look at the Sunday Tribune as well. They're leading with how the MK party is benefiting from gaining Floyd Shivambu. But before we perhaps talk about the Sunday Tribune, you can see there on your screen, the President Ramaphosa is arriving at the Durban City Hall moments ago. He's arriving there for that NWC taking place in KZN. All right. Let's continue with our newspapers. Let's come back to you, Dr. Tatelo. Looking at the Sunday Tribune there, they're leading with how the MKP will in fact reward Shivambu as well as Mzwanele Mani, who've crossed over from the EFF to the MK party.
Sorry, I didn't pick up the last question.
The Sunday Tribune is leading with how the Umkhonto weSizwe Party is set to reward Shivambu and Zonele Manyi for crossing over and joining the MK party.
Yes, I think the move by Mr. Shivambu to the MK is a blessing, although the MK on its own political party has its own challenges in terms of leadership and so forth. And I can only trust that Mr. Shivambu will bring his leadership style and his intellectual in terms of stabilizing the MK party.
All right, let's also look at some of the other papers here. The Sunday World, they're now leading with the story of the VBS saga. You'll remember that witness statement from VBS chairman Matodzi claiming that Dr. Zweli Mkhize of the ANC requested a 2 million rands donation for the party. In this article here, Mkhize says he can in fact confirm that he did meet the VBS bosses, but he met other bosses, other bosses of other banks as well, because asking for donations is not anything abnormal, and he can't confirm that the 2 million in fact did reach the ANC.
You see, my concern about this story of Dr. Mkhize is more about the timing. Why now? One of the things that we need to realize is that the current ANC leadership is under enormous amount of attack, both within the party and outside the party, and the likes of Mr. Mkhize is one such that they had bad experiences under the current leadership of the ANC. And generally, South Africa, the public opinion of South Africa is divided over a number of issues, with number of issues relating to the ANC, relating to the newly formed government of national unity, as well as the current president of President Ramaphosa. So these type of allegations, I think it's something that we are going to have going forward, trying by all means to discredit the current ANC-led government.
And then finally, taking a look at the City Press, they are focusing on the Bester escape, reporting here that in fact before he and Dr. Nandipha Makutumana were in fact arrested in East Africa, he had been arrested previously in the Western Cape and bribed his way out of it.
Yeah, I mean, the issue of Nandipha and the guy is that somehow it reveals the endemic corruption that we have within the correctional facilities in South Africa, and one can only hope that the new Ministry of Correctional Service would somehow try to alleviate the corruptions that we are having in the ministry in question.
We'll leave it there this afternoon. Let me thank you very much for your time with us today. That was Dr. Thomas Tadelo, who is a senior lecturer of political communication and media studies in the Department of Communication Science at the University of South Africa. You can see that at the bottom of your screen, that flight headed for Benghazi, Libya, carrying all 95 Libyans who were arrested last month. This was at a military training camp in White River in Mpumalanga. They are finally making their way home. This comes after the NPA dropped charges. They have said that they'll continue working with the Hawks to investigate who should be held accountable and responsible for planning, organizing and financing this operation in White River. And that aircraft is making its way out. We saw the last group of that 95 when we started at the top of the hour boarding that flight. They're now all on that aircraft. and they're making their way out of South Africa from the Kruger Mpumalanga International Airport, a very small airport in Mpumalanga, making their way to Benghazi, Libya. All right, and there that aircraft makes its way off. Investigation still continue as to what exactly was happening there in White River, Mpumalanga, and all charges against these 95 Libyans have been dropped. Home Affairs then were responsible for them as they had violated the Immigration Act for having provided incorrect information or misinformed immigration officers to get documents from Tunis in Tunisia to make their way into South Africa. And today they have finally been processed and are now heading to Benghazi, Libya. You're watching The Week Ahead right here on SABC News, Channel 404. Stay with us. Thank you for staying with us. To this now, President Cyril Ramaphosa says he is concerned about the rapid spread of Mpox across many regions in the African Union member states. He was speaking as the AU champion on pandemic prevention, preparedness and response. Ramaphosa says 17,541 cases and 517 deaths have been reported across 13 AU member states. Ramaphosa says he fully supports Africa's Centre for Disease Control's declaration of Mpox as a public health emergency of continental security. He says this will galvanize political leadership and engagement among AU heads of state and government, facilitating the rapid mobilization of essential financial and technical resources. He has commended the Permanent Representatives Committee for their decisive action in releasing $10.4 million from the COVID-19 fund to support the Mpox outbreak response. Ramaphosa further urged the international community, partners and organizations to mobilize stockpiles of vaccines and other medical countermeasures for deployment in Africa. The community of Riverlands near Malmesbury in the Swartland municipality is unsettled as another flash flood has caused chaos. This after 3 retention dams on a farm burst their banks last week, resulting in flooding which caused serious damage to homes, decimated water infrastructure and halted the electricity supply. On Saturday afternoon, a spillway created to slowly release water pressure from a 4th dam turned into a flash flood in an instant.
Fear struck the Riverlands community as they described hearing something sounding like thunder. A torrent of water rushed through a part of the area once again, less than 2 weeks after 3 dams caused flooding.
We are cleaning lot of mud and stuff in the whole world. Our chest of drawers is broken. Our freezers is not working at the moment. No water. The toilet sanitation is not good now for us. Because why? We can't live like this.
The community and the Swartland municipality were busy with mop-up operations when the latest incident occurred.
The Department of Water and Sanitation was working at the 4th dam, and what happened was that the spillway that they were busy working on has completely flooded, and the intention was to lower the water dam, the levels gradually, but unfortunately it created a fast-flowing, what quickly became again a flash flood.
Emergency evacuations were conducted, but the water has subsided, allowing for people to return home. Over 100 people are, however, still provided with shelter in 2 community facilities. Work was set to start on repairs to water infrastructure.
Our water pipes physically washed out of the ground, and now we have to rebuild that network, and that will unfortunately take several weeks. We currently have water trucks on the ground stationed throughout the area because the water outage does not only affect the residents of Riverlands, but it also affects the neighbouring area of Chatsworth.
The municipality and a number of aid organizations, including Gift of the Givers, have been on site since the initial flood.
We have served approximately 1,000 people per day by providing them with hot meals and water. Initially, we also distributed sleeping mats and blankets. This morning, we were in the area distributing food hampers when a young girl came running saying that the water is coming. We then jumped into our vehicle and we just drove for about 1 kilometer into the community, and we saw the water coming down the street, running like a river.
The Department of Water and Sanitation has since given the assurance that the fourth dam on the farm no longer poses a threat of bursting its banks. Damage assessments are underway. No fatalities or injuries have been reported, but a number of people have received treatment for shock. Mariska Botha, SABC News, Riverlands.
No person should be getting water from a tanker in this day and age. This is according to Tshwane Utilities MMC Themba Fosi, accompanied by Tshwane Mayor Celia Brink and his deputy, as they engaged Hammanskraal residents on measures to get clean, potable water in the area.
Hammanskraal will have clean water coming from their taps in phases from October this year. This is according to Tshwane Mayor Celia Brink, Utilities MMC Themba Fosi, and the appointed service provider Magali's Water.
The first module, which is now the new date is October, is going to cover Mandela Village, Marol Kolong, Ramudzi, Kekana Gardens, Steve Biko Village, Kutube Unit 9, Babeleche Industrial and Bridge View Informal Settlement.
Water tankers cost the city 98 million a year. Utilities MMC Themba Fosi emphasized how this development in October will see the back of water tankers that cost the city millions monthly.
You can imagine what we can do with an additional 100 million. I mean, with our aging infrastructure, that money can be repurposed into making sure that our people get proper meters, stable supply of water, and other programs that can be able to run. I mean, 100 million is a huge amount. And second to that is that not in this day and age, people should not be receiving water through water tankers.
The Hammanskraal water woes, dating back almost 2 decades, deteriorated in 2019 when partially treated sewage started spilling onto the Apis River. Tshwane Mayor says he will suggest that council should equitably scrap historical water bills for Hammanskraal residents.
Remember, it's not just Tshwane that provides water. There's a Rand water area in Hammanskraal. They get clean water in their taps. They're expected to pay. There is also an existing Magali's Water, a supply area. They get clean water in their taps. They're expected to pay. This is for that part of Hammanskraal that have been getting water from the city of Tshwane through the Rooiwal system, through the Apis River, where there hasn't been potable water.
Residents voiced their concerns.
Quite number of pipe tests. So I don't know if maybe they can also address on that issue.
She says, what's going to happen when we have to pay for water, because I have a meter and most of my neighbors do not have a water meter. The city also urged residents to be vigilant against those who vandalize municipal infrastructure. Offences Timo, SABC News, Hammanskraal.
The 95 Libyan nationals who were arrested at a suspected illegal military training base near White River in Mpumalanga have just been deported to their country. Dumelo Machocha, beg your pardon, is still live with us from the Kruger Mpumalanga International Airport. Dumelo, we just saw that aircraft leave just minutes ago. The Department of Home Affairs did say that they will ensure that the deportation will be swift. Was it?
Well, it was with a little bit of challenges, because you remember that they were supposed to actually leave yesterday, but because of the paperwork that the Home Affairs had to undergo, and also with the processing of these men, because 95 is a lot of numbers, so that they needed to process these men, it took a while. And also this morning, the first group of men arrived just after 4 o'clock in the morning, so you can imagine, and the third group just arrived just before 11 o'clock, and they were bringing them in batches because there were a lot of them. And these men are a lot of them, and also they didn't want to bring them all at once because of safety reasons and because of the issues that they might cause here at the airport, because it's such a small airport, and also they cannot bring all 95 of them all at the same time and be processed here. So they have to process them in small batches. And remember, this airport, because it's a private airport, only start operating around 7 o'clock. So when these men arrived here around 4 o'clock, they could not go inside the airport to be processed. So the process took a while, took hours and hours. So we've been waiting here since the early hours of this morning, waiting for these men to actually get into the plane and start going to their country. They have the 95 men have already now departed South Africa. Now they are on the air. They are heading towards Benghazi. We understand that the plane will take a number of stops before it can get to Libya. But the men, they will be arriving in their country in the next 24 hours. They will be in their country in the next 24 hours. But these men, they were excited when we saw them. When I went to speak to them on the other side, they were excited. They were happy that they were leaving this country, because they're saying that they've been treated badly, especially in prison, and also they were not allowed to get like a food. You remember, these men are of Arab descent, so they eat halal food. So they were saying that they're excited to leave. They were happy. They were smoking cigarettes, drinking a lot of coffee before they can get into that plane. But right now they're on the air. They're heading towards Benghazi.
We saw a couple of them waving in jubilation as they were boarding that plane. But as they leave, they also leave us with plenty of unanswered questions still. Who will answer them for us?
Well, indeed, because who brought these men is the question that the police now have to start telling us. Like, who brought these men here? What are they coming here to do exactly? And also, what is the investigation with the military, the suspected military camp that they were training at? Are there going to be charges laid against the owners, against the trainers at the camp? What is going to happen there? So those are the questions that now the police need to answer. But also a lot of unanswered questions. How did these men get into the country, first of all? And how they were not detected immediately when they arrived here in April. It's been a number of months before they were arrested. Why did the investigation take so long for the police actually to arrest and to deport the men? Because now the charges that they were only facing, it was the charge of the contravention of the Immigration Act for misrepresentation of why they were in the country, and that was the charge that they were facing. But also a lot of unanswered questions there. And how did these men arrived here? But now we understand they're already on their way. They have, we understand there's one embassy representation that is also in the plane with them to fly back to Benghazi with them. Home Affairs already said, released a statement saying that the Libyan government is paying for the flight and is paying for this exercise that was taking place this afternoon. So you can imagine. So because a lot of the public have been asking who is paying for these men to actually leave their country, but we know now that their country is the one who's footing the bill for the flight.
There's also the question of the owner of the camp and whether or not he had permission to run the operations that were being run there as well. Again, a big question mark around that particular individual. Are we any closer to getting a sense of what transpired there? There were all sorts of firearms there. Some of those firearms were licensed as well that were found in that particular campsite. Various other objects as well there. It was a solid operation being run there. Yet weeks later, we're none the wiser as to who again was running it, whether or not they had permission to do so, but also running it to meet what end.
Exactly, and also, misrepresentation also on their license, because when they applied to CIRA, they applied as a security company, not as a military training company, because services, because that's what we're hearing from the police, is saying that the operation there was a military operation, was not a security services. So they were running a military camp. That's what they were running there. So CIRA has already suspended their licenses license of the owners of the license of this facility. But also we understand that the police are saying that their investigation continues, especially regarding the owner and also the trainers also at this camp. But that investigation, police saying that investigation is almost complete, but that investigation is still ongoing.
Dumelo Machoho will leave it there. Thank you very much. Coming to us live from the Kruger-Mpumalanga International Airport. Just moments ago, the 95 Libyans have left. That flight is destined for Benghazi, Libya. They were arrested last month at a military camp, an illegal military camp that they were caught at. And now they're making their way home to Benghazi, Libya. You're watching The Week Ahead right here on the SABC News Channel 404. More on the other side of this. Thank you for staying with us. To this now, political analyst Dr. Harlan Klutter says it is an indictment on the entire governance system that state organs owe municipalities billions of rands. This follows a written parliamentary reply by Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana that government owes municipalities collectively 18.6 billion rands.
The new financial cycle of municipalities started on the 1st of July this year. And soon all eyes will be on the audit outcomes of the 257 municipalities in the country when they are tabled in Parliament later this month. The last audit reports for the 2021-2022 municipal year painted a bleak picture. It indicated some municipalities had liquidity constraints.
There are 70 municipalities, 70, that themselves have indicated that they are concerned about their own financial health. They see that they are delivering a net deficit on operations in that they are generating less income than their expenses.
However, the South African Local Government Association says in total, municipalities were owed 347 billion rand at the end of March this year. It added that the amount includes debt from business as well as households, and that government's debt is the smallest. The association says this hampers their ability to pay creditors and service their debts.
So if municipalities are unable to collect from business, households, and also from government, it impacts on the municipality's ability to execute that plan, meaning extending the delivery of services to communities.
An expert in local government matters expressed concern about the government's debt to municipalities.
Municipalities rely on funding to be able to continue to deliver services to communities. It also says something about the revenue collection strategies of spheres of government, and it's also an indictment of the entire governance system.
SALGA says it is using intergovernmental relations continuously, calling on government to service its debt to municipalities. Lula Mamatya, SABC News, Parliament.
The Langkloof in the Eastern Cape is home to many farms which are manned and kept by the people of the small towns that surround it. Many of these farms have been converted to triple BEE farms, where farm workers have become shareholders in various capacities. One such farm is Groendal Plaas, where the workers own 50% of the farm and the other 50% belongs to a company. The allegations of these farm workers, however, do not reflect the progressive stats mentioned. They say they are subjected to ill treatment and inhumane living conditions.
An area renowned for its beautiful landscapes and fruit exports. There are hundreds of men and women who work these lands that contribute largely to the country's economy. But these workers allege that all they get in return is poor treatment and poor living conditions. Dilapidated houses, limited electricity, dirty pit latrines have all become a norm here.
En ons moet doen wat die If you have to work in an area where you rain wet the whole day, then you must do it. Until he says so, you can come out. He is rude. He has no way of speaking to a person. Say now you need leave because you are sick. He will say stay at home and never come back. It is so hard working under this man. Everything he says goes. You can't talk back to him. He mistreats us with electricity as well as because we don't understand the readings. If he says it is 400 or 500 a fortnight, then that is what you must pay.
They chased me away with a lawyer. I don't even know if he really was a lawyer. When I brought the proof that I was in Hammanskraal to make an ID for my son, they called the lawyer again and they chased me off the farm. There was no package or payment or anything to show for the fact that I worked there for 18 years.
The managing director of the farm, Johan Kritzinger, says some of these issues were never reported to the housing committee that deals with such.
The farm isn't really in a position to spend a lot of money. On the other side, it's also their homes. How it looks there is their own doing. I can't be kept responsible if they destroy their place. So we try to do what we can from outside, but it's their homes. Even if they don't work here anymore, they can continue to live in the houses. I can't put them out. If they do move out, we break down the homes because we don't want people living here anymore.
Labour experts say there is no obligation for farm owners to provide housing for their workers. If they do, however, certain expectations must be met.
The house or the dwelling where the farm worker would be occupying, it must have a durable roof and it must be waterproof. The house must also have glass windows which can be opened. To the extent that in that farm there's electricity, there must be electricity in that house, which means now if there's electricity inside the house, it must be there if the infrastructure allows. Then the other point which I have to mention is that when it comes to the issue of ablution facilities, the requirement in terms of that item is that there must be a flush toilet or a pit latrine. And if it's not inside the house, it must be within a close proximity once again. And I think I've mentioned the issue of safe water, and if I didn't, I'll admit that there must be safe water. And now, what is also important that the determination does also make reference to the size of the house. It must be at least 30 square meters.
These shareholders also claim to have only received a dividend of 500 Rand once in 2014.
The company must comply with the provisions of the Companies Act. Basically, solvency and liquidity, and that is the responsibility of the board of directors of the company. Solvency means you must have enough assets to pay your debts. Okay? So that is the first thing. If your debts are more than your assets, then you have a problem. The other requirement, and you must meet both requirements, is the company as an entity must be able to pay its debts as they become due in the ordinary course of business. So you must have that liquidity. If you can't meet that particular requirement, then you can't declare a dividend.
Kritzinger says it is difficult to maintain the houses on the farm as it costs a lot of money. He says the farm prefers that workers live off-site in neighbouring towns. Kim Daniels, SABC News in the Langkloof.
You're watching The Week Ahead right here on SABC News Channel 404. We will have more for you at the top of the hour. Police in KwaZulu-Natal have launched a massive manhunt for suspects who shot and killed 6 men at an informal settlement in Section V6 in Umlazi on Saturday night. The local economy is likely to perform better in the second quarter than the first quarter due to slightly better conditions. President Cyril Ramaphosa says he is concerned about the rapid spread of Mpox across many regions in the African Union member states. This is the week ahead on the SABC News Channel 404. We are live to you from our studios in Auckland Park, Johannesburg. As always, we invite you to participate in the conversations. Give us a ring. Our studio line is 011-714-0680, 0681 or 0682. I am Sebenzile Nkambule. A very good afternoon to you and welcome to the week ahead. We start here this afternoon. Police in KwaZulu-Natal have launched a massive manhunt for suspects who shot and killed 6 men at an informal settlement in Section V6 in Umlazi on Saturday night. Reports indicate that the 3 men were seated outside their rented accommodation consuming alcohol when unknown suspects arrived and opened fire at them. The suspects proceeded to the landlord's house where they shot him and another man who was also inside the house. The suspects also shot another man on the pathway. All 6 victims, aged between 20 and 40 years old, were declared dead on the scene. The motive of the killings is still unknown.
The victims are known. They've been identified, but the suspects, they're the ones that are known at this stage. We are trying to put together intelligence, like I've said, to ensure that we locate their whereabouts, we find them and take them to justice. The victims have been identified. We know that 3 of the victims were tenants at the place where they were killed. The one was the landlord, and also another man who was killed with the landlord. And on the pathway, they were leading also shot another man. So 6 of them were shot in the same place and they died at the scene.
The local economy is likely to perform better in the second quarter than the first quarter due to slightly better conditions. The economy contracted by 0.1% in the first quarter, dragged mainly by the goods-producing sectors due to negativity brought about by load shedding and lower demand at the beginning of the year. There's been a constant supply of electricity in the second quarter, and economists say a slowdown in inflation may have been supportive of spending.
A slight bounce back from the first quarter contraction in economic performance is expected in the second quarter. Economists say the local economy will likely register growth of just below 0.5%. While the agriculture sector performed better in the first quarter, drier weather conditions linked to the El Nino phenomenon threaten to impact this sector negatively. Despite the constant electricity supply, the manufacturing sector's performance was weak, growing by 0.9% in the quarter. That's on the back of lower local demand and the weaker global economy.
We think that GDP will already be a little bit stronger in the second quarter, and generally we expect an uptrend in economic growth over the medium term. And that should be positive from an employment perspective.
The electricity reforms taking shape are expected to have boosted economic performance.
Now, on the load shedding numbers, we haven't seen load shedding in over 4 months. And I think that, has contributed to a better sentiment around energy security. So going down the line, I think we should see some improvement coming through on business confidence, firstly from the increase in energy availability, but also because the government of national unity is now in place and a lot of that political uncertainty is behind us, given that the May elections have already occurred. On the electricity side of things, we could see a further improvement in the energy availability factor within the next couple of weeks. We've got 1 more unit of Medupi coming online. That's just under 800 megawatts. And we've also got the second unit of Kuberg that's likely to come online. That's just under 1,000 megawatts. So that should continue producing at Eskom's generation fleet, making that energy availability factor a little bit higher.
The improvement in economic performance will likely lead to better employment prospects, although not strong enough to make a dent in the high unemployment levels.
If there isn't a lot of performance, you'd find lots of companies having to let go of the staff. And that's what we've seen with the unemployment figures increasing to around 33.5%. of people not participating and engaging in the economy. And that just shows you that there isn't a demand for work because there isn't a demand for production. And that shows you that in terms of growth, which is a culmination of labor, of production, of demand, that growth ultimately is not being realized. And you're also looking at the second quarter. The South African Reserve Bank has said that they're looking at growth to grow around 0.6% in the second half of the year. And that on its own is not necessary for a developing economy like South Africa. It's not really, not even the word's not necessary, but it's not sufficient.
Growth for the year is expected to be just above the 1% mark.
We think that the full year will probably end off just a little bit higher than 1%. I think, at the margin relative to the start of the year, the fact that we haven't had load shedding for quite some time and Eskom's generation fleet performing a lot better, given that they've done quite a lot of that maintenance in the past. We haven't actually had as many unplanned breakdowns as what we've had in the past couple of months. I think that should add to some upside surprise to that 1% sort of estimate for growth this year. And of course, we've also got the two-part pension reforms that could at the margin add to some consumer spending. We're quite optimistic that the growth in fixed income should start picking up over the course of the remainder of this year and next year.
Expected interest rate cuts towards the end of the year will also likely boost consumer spending and contribute positively to GDP. Gloria Sefako-Mosi, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Now, there are differing views on the Municipal Structures Amendment Bill Act of 2024, also known as the Coalition Bill. Some political parties suggest the bill in its current form has undemocratic elements in it. The bill aims to amend the existing Local Government Municipal Structures Amendment Act of 2021 by providing a legislative framework to guide the formation and the management of coalition municipalities in the country.
Once enacted, the amendments will provide a definition of a coalition agreement to compel political parties to enter into negotiated, written and binding agreements in municipalities where no political party has a majority of seats in councils. But this is a limited approach because of the government of national unity, according to some.
The GNU itself having a focus on municipalities, having a focus on local government, also means that what happens at national and at provincial is going to be affected very much by what happens at a national level. So I don't think that we can actually legislate for coalitions at municipality without considering the implications of coalitions at provincial and national on municipalities.
Some, they say the bill in its current form should be withdrawn.
Some of the measures being implemented here are anti-democratic, will result in wasted votes, and infringe on the constitutional rights of parties and voters to see the results of the election being reflected in councils and ultimately in legislatures. And so we think that the legislation should be withdrawn. The Deputy President's dialogue should be finalized, and then legislation that affects or regulates all spheres of government, national, provincial, and local, needs to be introduced.
However, the ACDP cautions on legislative overreach, and the ACDP will oppose the introduction of any threshold, electoral threshold, at any level of government. The ACDP also will oppose the limitation of motions of no confidence in any legislature, because the ACDP believes that this is unconstitutional.
Kosato says this bill is necessary.
The draft bills build upon the discussion that took place last year, hosted by the presidency, on a framework for coalition government. It builds upon existing legal foundations in the law for municipalities. There is a need to do more further work on it. For example, to say if a municipality, and down the road even a provincial, even national government, if they can't fulfill their constitutional or the legal mandates of passing legislation, passing budgets, electing office bearers, then perhaps a coalition must be required to go into effect immediately, and that can follow along the mayoral committee system where parties are represented in the executive.
Attempts to get the Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs were unsuccessful. Abongwe Kobokana, SABC News at Parliament.
Attacks on elderly women is a concern in some communities in Limpopo. Several women have been attacked, some killed in separate incidents in the past 2 weeks. A 92-year-old and a 74-year-old were assaulted and killed in their homes in Mogalakwena. A 101-year-old woman was sexually assaulted in Sekhukhune 2 weeks ago. Please be advised the following report contains content that may upset sensitive viewers.
92-year-old Makwena Mokwetlem was attacked and burned alive by unknown suspects at her home in Strijkwater. The family says they were awakened by the blaze in the early hours of Tuesday. The suspected arsonist gained entry through the window and set Mokwetle on fire in her bedroom. Those first to arrive on the scene say they found her unresponsive and her hands tied on the back. I arrived at the scene and there was fire all over the house. We tried with neighbors to extinguish the fire, but we were unsuccessful. The painful part is when we were in the place, we looked around for my mother and we noticed her. She was lying down, tied up with ropes and unresponsive. The incident has sent shockwaves in the community of Strijkwater. Community members says the latest incident is the third in their village.
This is not the first incident occurred in our area, but the two previous one, the first one occurred 20 years back. The second one occurred last year, this time August.
In another incident, 74-year-old Hlashila Mpukube was killed after being attacked with a hoe. Mpukube was repeatedly hacked with a hoe in a broad daylight on Sunday by a male suspect. Her son recalled how his mother was found lifeless with open wounds to the head.
On my arrival, I found that the community members were packed in my mom's yard. Others were outside with some cars parked outside. And I immediately asked, what happened? What is my mom? And they said that he's at the back. Indeed, I walked around the house only to find my mom lying down with her face down and with several wounds on her head. It really broke my heart. I never felt that pain.
Police have arrested a 40-year-old suspect in connection with Mpukube's killing. They've also arrested a 29-year-old suspect in connection with a sexual assault of the 100-year-old woman at Zayplus in Sekhukhune. Investigations are underway in the case of a 92-year-old.
We can confirm that we are investigating the two cases, the one in Mahwelering and then the one in Gilead Policing Precinct. But we can also confirm as the South African Police Service in Limpopo that in the matter of Mahwelering, we have been able to arrest the suspect in this regard. Is a 40-year-old Zimbabwean national, Austin. He's currently in custody. He will go back to court on the 13th of September.
Social Development has urged pensioners to reside with their relatives or use old age facilities.
No elderly person should be staying alone. We are calling therefore on affected family members that in the event that there is no one that can stay with an elderly person, they need to at least assign a guardian or an external family member.
An organization representing elderly people says they are concerned and they will march against the attacks of elderly women in Limpopo.
We are going to march tomorrow. We will be with a number of supporting organizations, and we would like the police to arrest the perpetrator.
The NPO has also called on government to build more old age homes in the province. Limpopo only has 3 old age homes owned by government in Polokwane, Sibitela and Belabela. Mahlatse Paladim, SABC News, Mogalakwena.
Thank you very much for staying with us. Chief Justice Raymond Zondo is set to deliver his final judgment on the 21st of August 2024, marking the conclusion of an illustrious career spanning 27 years on the bench. This moment will be observed during a special ceremonial sitting of the Constitutional Court, where members of the Executive, Parliament and the legal profession will come together to honour his contributions to South Africa's judiciary. Joining us for more on this is constitutional expert, Advocate Lufuno Navondwe, who's joining us in studio. Advocate Lufuno, thank you very much for your time with us this afternoon and the week ahead. The Chief Justice Raymond Zondo's term is about to come to an end. Reflect briefly on his contribution. I mean, a very long time spent on the bench. We often think about his chairpersonship of the State Capture Commission, but of course he did a lot more than that prior to 2018 when he assumed the role of chairperson of the commission.
Yes, I think this is a very long career which need to be celebrated, and we are grateful as South Africans, as young lawyers, to have Judge Raymond Zondo. His legacy speaks for itself. He started this career a long time ago as a candidate attorney at Victoria Mcenge Attorneys, and he went on and became an attorney. He was the chairperson of the governing body of the CCMA, Commission for Conciliation, Mediation and Arbitration, and he was appointed firstly as a judge in 1997 in the Labour Court. He was a judge of the Labour Court. He went on and became a judge of the High Court, and he became a judge president of the Labour Court and the Labour Appeal Court between the year 2000 until 2010. That was a decade. Mm-hmm. And after that, he then joined, he became a judge president, and he then joined the Constitutional Court in 2012 to date. So in other words, it will now mark 12 years in the Constitutional Court. You must know that in terms of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, you become a judge of the Constitutional Court for 12 years.
Yes.
So he will be retiring, of course, as a Chief Justice, because he has since assumed a position of a Chief Justice since 2022, when he was appointed by the President.
How much has he been able to do in that, just over 2 years of him in that role as Chief Justice? Some who would have felt that perhaps the President Ramaphosa should have appointed of course, incoming Chief Justice, Justice Maya, given that she would in fact be serving a much longer term, and that it was always known that Zondo wouldn't have a long time. In the 2 years that he's been there, what are some of the changes that he's been able to effect, or the impact that we can measure as we reflect on his contribution?
Thank you. I think we must first know that prior to him becoming a Chief Justice, he was a Deputy Chief Justice. He was appointed in 2017. So that was more like a transition to him going to that position. And a lot has been done. I mean, the judiciary is stable. The judiciary is independent. There's no interference in judiciary. In fact, we have one of the best judiciary in the world, in South Africa. And the rule of law is always the basic principle wherein we test the independence of the judiciary, because we are all subjected to the rule of law. We have seen a lot of judgments in the Constitutional Court which were groundbreaking, which then determine the way in which we must do things in the country. I think during this short stint as the Chief Justice, he has stabilized the judiciary. The judiciary is well respected, and there were a lot of groundbreaking decisions which were delivered, which is commendable. To
say he stabilized it in the 2 years, are you suggesting it was unstable before he assumed the role of Chief Justice?
Not necessarily that it was unstable, but remember we had a state capture, and the state capture was affecting all organs of state. The judiciary was also somehow affected. So I believe that he managed to because of that investigation of the state capture, he managed to ensure that the judiciary is independent from the executive. He managed to ensure that we know what happened in the state capture. We know the corruption. We know how state-owned entities were captured, and we know some of the role players, because some of the role players were sitting judges who were also affected. So we saw them going into the commission of inquiry to give evidence and so on. So it shows to you that all of us, we are subject to the rule of law. It doesn't matter the position you hold in a society. As long as you are a human being, we are all subjected to the rule of law, including even the president of the country. We have seen the president going to court, answering for his cases, yes, which shows to you that our judiciary is independent, our judiciary is robust, and our judiciary responds to the needs of the society.
Here, of course, sitting on that state capture commission, it cost the country more than R1 billion, 4 years worth of work, and thousands of pages in reports, reporting, of course, and uncovering some of these issues outlined here. And obviously, the greatest level of criticism is what we saw in that time, and often those who are supporters of the former president, Jacob Zuma. We know that he's somebody who's very litigious, would of course attack not only the judiciary but also the person of the Chief Justice Zondo. Will this period, the 4 years of the Capture Commission and his 2 years as Chief Justice subsequent to that period, really be the defining period of his career?
It is a defining moment of his career, but prior to that, he has done a lot in labor law. I mean, there were a lot of groundbreaking decisions in labor law which he has delivered, which has shaped the way we do things, like the famous case of Mudise, wherein he provided the principles of unprotected striking workers, that they do have the right, even though they have strike. And also the famous case of Nihau versus UCT, which talks about the interpretation of Section 197 of the Labor Relations Act, which talks about the sale of business, which is a going concern, which he has provided principles there. So he have done a lot, but even on the state capture, remember, that was a moment wherein we have lost a plot as the country. But the investigation, the report itself, it brings back our country, bring back accountability, bring back transparency, because our leaders must be transparent. Our leaders must be accountable. They must be free from corruption. And I think he has done a lot. But maybe a lot still needs to be done, because we have not seen much of the implementation of that report, because the implementation of the report will take this country forward and be able to ensure that we don't repeat what we have done during the state capture.
Of course, it's not for the judiciary to ensure that the recommendations of the report are actually implemented. So in many ways, it's a defining moment of his career, but in many ways, it's a very disappointing aspect as well, that all of that work, the resources that went in there, and given the attention as well, not only within the country, but globally, around how as a country will deal with this issue of capture, that not much has been done about it.
It's unfortunate that in the country we have separation of powers.
It's unfortunate that we have it?
It's unfortunate that we have what we call separation of powers. Separation of powers means that the judiciary will interpret and apply the law. Yes. The executive will have to execute the law and implement decisions of government, and you also have parliament who make the laws. So it's unfortunate that the judiciary cannot implement the state capture inquiry report. It's only the executive who must do their part, and less has been done in that area. And we still, as the citizens, we will want the state capture report to be implemented fully, so that those who were found on the wrong side of the law can also be prosecuted, can also face the full might of the law. So that part has not been done well.
Somebody would be listening to your advocate and saying, hang on a second, is this advocate advocating for us to put an end to the separation of powers? We welcome it, right? Because if you're having judges who are unelected officials, they the public doesn't get to say necessarily who sits there. We vote for political parties, parliament appoints who then becomes the head of state and so on. The separation has its benefits. Surely the argument should be about how do we ensure that case in point, an important report like that, the state of capture report, is in fact implemented by various state organs who they need to do the work, right? The NPA, they need to prosecute those who have, who may or may not have questions to answer. Surely it's not a question of the separation of powers.
Yes, the separation of powers itself is not a problem. It ensures checks and balances.
Yes.
But the issue here is that the judiciary have released the report, but the report is not being implemented. And the responsibility lies on government, not on the judiciary. So the public outside there, they will want the work of the judiciary to be implemented so that we can be able to go forward. But unfortunately, the judiciary cannot do anything. They've done their part. And now it is up to the government to do their part of the implementation of the state capture recommendations and the report.
We're about to enter an era we are yet to, which is unprecedented. We've never been here before as a country. We're going to have the first woman Chief Justice. Some of the issues that still the incumbent Chief Justice Zondo dealt with upon entering office was the question of there not being sufficient women representation in terms of heads of courts across the country, but just also women taking up important roles of leadership. The incoming Chief Justice Maya, of course, was head of the Supreme Court. Has he done enough to shift the dial on that front so that we have better representation?
I think he has done his part. Because when he was the judge president of the Labour Court and Labour Appeal Court, there were women who were appointed in the bench. Some were acting. Even when he was a Chief Justice, when he was a Deputy Chief Justice, we saw a lot of women also serving in the Constitutional Court. So he has done his part, but a lot still need to be done because we need women representation in the country. I believe that the women who are there, they are not sufficient. They are not enough.
What is the issue? You work in the legal fraternity. What's the issue? Or is the issue the same as is the case across sectors, that women are just left behind or doors are shut in their faces when opportunities are available for them and they prove themselves competent to take on those opportunities? I
think they are left behind because when you go to law schools, there are a lot of women who are admitted to do the law degrees. There are a lot of women who are graduating. Yes. There are a lot of women who are in practice. So I think we just have to improve as the country to ensure that we open the doors for women to also occupy positions in the bench. So a lot still need to be done, and I believe the incoming Chief Justice, Justice Mandisa Maya, will also ensure that he improve on that so that we have women entering into the bench. The
final question, because we're out of time, the issue of the backlog of cases, that cases just take forever. And I think the figure was at about 30% in terms of a backlog of cases as well. That's a big problem.
This is a cause for concern because cases which goes to court must be finalized without delay. So when you start to have delays, it also affects access to justice. It also affects the access which our people have to the justice system. I think our people have much trust on the justice system, and the sooner we have cases which are finalized timelessly, that will also assist the judiciary to move forward.
Let me thank you very much for your time with us this afternoon. That was constitutional expert, Advocate Lufuno Nevondwe, joining us in studio. That special sitting there will take place on the 21st of August, later this month, where Chief Justice, the outgoing Chief Justice of South Africa, will hand down his final judgment as he ends what has been an illustrious career, 27 years on the bench. You're watching The Week Ahead right here on SABC News Channel 404. Stay with us. Thank you for staying with us. To this now, health activists are warning that cancer treatment in Gauteng is in crisis. Labour Union SAFTU says today many patients are waiting for radiation treatment and there are many healthcare facilities without adequate equipment. It adds that thousands of cancer patients are languishing on waiting lists, often for over a year now, in desperate need of life-saving treatment. Last month, the Cancer Alliance, represented by Section 27, filed a court application against the department after the department failed to spend hundreds of millions allocated to it for the treatment of cancer patients. We're joined this afternoon by Salome Meyer, Director of the Cancer Alliance. Salome, thank you very much for your time with us this afternoon. The situation sounds quite bad. How bad is it really?
Good afternoon to you and to all the viewers. It is indeed quite a desperate situation, and I say that because we have, initially when we started all of this, we had a list of more than, 3,000 patients, 3,000 of them, being on a waiting list at Charlotte Matkeke already, and some of them for more than 3 years. In fact, there's a couple of prostate cancer patients that dates back to 2016. Now, the question that you have to ask is, what then do you say to those patients? You've been waiting for your radiation therapy. You've been waiting in hoping that, first of all, that you're going to live, hoping that you're going to get the treatment that will, in fact, enable you to live, but also hoping that the Department of Health will treat you with the dignity to at least inform you of what is happening. And none of that has been happening. That is despite funds being allocated to, in fact, treat those patients.
In April, Salome, the Health Department said 534 million rands was to be invested in equipment and 250 million rands in outsourcing radiation for 1 year. What reasons are you hearing as to why it is that they're not able to spend the money or aren't able to do what they've set out to do?
So let's be clear on the 250 million that was allocated. That was indeed allocated in the previous budget year. Last year, that meant that they had to spend that money since April of last year until now. They have done nothing, and the 250 million, in fact, was more than enough to treat the 3,000 patients in an outsourcing model. They failed to do that. Now we have also the allocated money, the 534 million, that is then to be expended over the next 2 financial years with regards to equipment as well as anything else. But it's not only just for the oncology backlog, it's also meant for surgical backlogs. The question is, what are you going to do with that amount of money, and on what are you going to spend it? We do realize that there are 3 Linac machines that was bought in 2022 that is still in storage and will be in storage for at least until possibly March of next year, if we start reading the statements that are coming out from the Department of Health, because the bunkers associated with those Linacs, the construction of those bunkers, haven't even started building that. The costs of the bunkers will increase, and once the bunkers are ready for the Linacs to be installed, each of those machines has to be what they call regassed at least a minimum cost of 10 million rand per machine. So escalation of construction cost, all of that, and your warranty for your machines have already expired. Then we're not even talking about the fact that there isn't enough staff associated to manage those machines. Without staff, how are you actually going to commission those machines? That is where SAPRA comes in, and SAPRA then says, well, if you haven't got adequate staff, sorry, we're not going to give you a license. We also know that there isn't a budget for that staff. So the problem is a complex problem that has been coming for years, and it's not just a quick fix.
What then for people on a day-to-day basis, right, are living with this disease. They require all sorts of treatment. But what options do they have here? Because we understand that Gauteng, the Gauteng government, of course, reporting that the Charlotte Maxeke Johannesburg Academic Hospital, as well as the Steve Biko Academic Hospital, are overwhelmed by the sheer number of patients who are waiting and requiring urgent care. So in the interim, while government is trying to figure itself out, what options are there for these patients? And linked to that, is there any way that the private sector is able to assist?
So I think we need to be clear. I think that the waiting list at Steve Biko is at least not in the same situation that what is happening at Charlotte Maxeke. The 3,000 patients that we're talking about is a backlog list. We also have to be clear that the backlog list patients, the majority of them, you have to be reassessed whether they in fact still require radiation treatment, whether their cancers have not spread or metastasized, or whether they are still alive for that matter. Patients that are on the current waiting list, meaning in terms of just the normal patients that are coming through, we understand that those patients are also in a way affected because of the fact that the equipment and the staff shortages at Charlotte Maxeke is not being addressed. And we also need to understand what is happening at Steve Biko in terms of their license, whether their license in fact has been approved by SAPRA, again taking us back to the issue of staff shortages. And that's why I say that it is not just a very easy fix in terms of just buying equipment. You asked the question whether the private sector can come on board. Of course, the private sector can come on board. It's an outsourcing model that one need to actually put onto the table. And I openly said, that if the NHI already had been implemented properly, we wouldn't have had 3,000 patients on a waiting list, because we would have found those patients already referred in an outsourcing model to the private sector. When we look at the 250 million rand that was allocated, it would have been enough to treat 3,000 patients in an outsourcing model. I've already indicated to that. Why do we say that? Or we base our facts on what exists in government. There are best model practice models that are already in place in some of the other provinces where radiation treatment has been outsourced to the private sector for a baseline price. Now, that's the baseline price that we used when we made the argument that you require 250 million rand to treat 3,000 patients. Based on that, Gauteng Treasury made that amount available. Then you ask the question, if that has been made available to you, what are you doing?
In your view, Salome, what is really the source of this indecisiveness, or what perhaps in part also sounds like ineptitude? You're also taking the MEC of Health to court as well. How are you hoping the courts may in fact assist with some of these issues here that sound as though could in fact be sorted out relatively in a straightforward manner by implementing a number of things, and in fact bringing in the resources that you need into the system? So how are you hoping the courts will assist in this regard?
In fact, you are in a way 100% correct. But we've been asking the Department of Health, that's Gauteng then, for the last 3 years. We've been sitting around a table with them for more than 3 years. And we've been providing them with information, and nothing has happened. So If nothing has happened, then yes, then all that you can say is, number one, I mean, either they don't want to listen to you. Secondly, they're not interested in really solving the problem. And in fact, even the national department has come on board to actually give them an information session about how outsourcing can be done. And even that was ignored. So what is that? I don't know what you actually call it. For me, it is basically just bad management. What are we hoping the courts to do? We're hoping the courts, first of all, to provide us with the right to actually have information exactly on that backlog list, meaning that we can actually determine the true quantum of the problem. How many patients will still require treatment, how many patients will never require treatment any longer because they either won't need it or they have passed away. And that, in fact, will indicate to us also the graveness of this problem and the fact that we cannot allow government to just completely disregard what has been asked, what we've been negotiating, as well as the fact that money has been allocated. Let us go back to the Subramani case many years ago. And in that case, very particularly, it was said that if government does not have the funds or the means to actually deal with the problem, then technically government, your human rights have not been violated. However, that's what is called progressive realization. What we have seen is that the Gauteng Treasury Department made available 250 million rand. You had more than a year. You made promises around the table that, in fact, by August of last year, you would have already a plan in place. We're a year later, and not one patient have been treated.
Salome, in February of 2022, the Provincial Department of Health established the Gauteng Cancer Crisis Task Team. What has that particular team, contributed to? Has it added any value?
That team added a lot of value when we met, and we met for 6 months. And then after that, the task team was disbanded, never met again. We tried everything to get them back. And that's when we reverted to the National Department of Health to bring them on board, to revert to the Treasury Department to bring them on board. And that's when the money was allocated. Then we had meetings with them again in 2023, talking about the outsourcing model and how that could work. And then all of a sudden, again, nothing happened.
There's a new so-called Gauteng government of the Gauteng Provincial Unity, right? Government of Unity in the province as well. And whenever there is some level of newness, some new faces in the provincial government, that it's an opportunity perhaps for there to be some sort of change. Do you have that hope? Do you think that the shift after the May 24 elections, the shift that it's brought on in the province, that this perhaps may lead to some sort of change? And if not, what then? What does your organization, as the Cancer Alliance, do to try and, in fact, get some greater transparency and understanding, again, the numbers and of the backlog, the quantum there, the fatalities perhaps that may have, in fact, been created as a result of the crisis within the Department of Health in the province?
The government of national unity is still young, and I think at provincial level, there's a lot that needs to happen. And in fact, in Gauteng specifically, there's not much changes going to happen with the government of national unity there. Quite honestly, let's be frank and honest. So that, in terms of that, what we as the Cancer Alliance are now asking on a national basis is for the Minister of Health to consider the establishment of a national cancer institute. Such an institute would start looking at the overarching issue of how do you manage cancer equitably in this country. That means equitably between the private as well as the public sector. We do not have standardized guidelines for let's say your first 10 top cancers in this country. So there's a difference between how private and public treat their patients, as well as how patients are treated between the provinces. So 9 different provinces, plus then add the private sector, plus then add all the 72 different medical schemes, and that's what you have for cancer. So that we need to start sorting out in terms of equity. But when you then start looking at what needs to happen at a provincial basis, you need to start looking at integrated cancer care services. There needs to be something that links your primary health care right through the journey that the cancer patient have to take from basic screening at a primary health care level, through your diagnostic screening, through your treatment at a tertiary center, and then back again into the community. All of that needs to happen in an integrated approach. However, what is happening now is that all of those subsets that I've now been referring to are being treated in silos. Primary healthcare on its own, diagnostics on its own, treatment on its own, and we're not even talking about supportive care. And then palliative care within the community is completely non-existing. So those are really the issues that a National Cancer Institute can start looking at in terms of what is it that we want in this country for cancer care that can really make a difference.
Mm-hmm. And as a final one, Salome, have you already engaged the new minister? I mean, he's not new in the role. Obviously, he's been reshuffled. He's now back in health as well. You'll remember also previously, a couple of years ago as well, KwaZulu-Natal was struggling with similar issues. And so it's a national problem as well in trying perhaps to be more efficient about health interventions in the country. Have you had an opportunity to engage? And again, are you hopeful that there might be a shift given the scale of the problem?
We are definitely hopeful that there will be a shift. In terms of we engaging with the minister, we have not as yet engaged with him. And quite honestly, my comment was that we need to actually give the national minister just a moment to breathe and to settle back in, with regards to his new old portfolio. But it is on our agenda to specifically contact him, because our request for a National Cancer Institute was in fact already on paper to the Director General just before the elections. We would like to follow that up and say, here is a positive proposal from civil society. And I may actually add that it's not just civil society. There are many clinicians and professional societies that actually fully agree with the sentiment. It is, in fact, the how we are going to get to that point that needs to be sorted out. And we definitely want to have a National Cancer Institute in this country that could be held accountable. And accountability, your highest form of accountability, remains Parliament. So those are very technical issues that needs to be sorted out, and everybody is asking how. We don't have the answer, because we need to do that collectively and in a transparent manner.
Salome, let's leave it at this afternoon. Lovely speaking to you. Salome Meyer is the director of the Cancer Alliance. Thank you very much for your time. To this now, a spokesperson for the ruling BJP in India has blamed last week's rape and murder of a female junior doctor at Kolkata Hospital on local authorities, calling it an institutional failure. Shaina NC says the state government has to be held accountable for the events of last week. Meanwhile, the Ministry of Health is urging all doctors to return to work following a nationwide protest strike.
Hospitals and clinics across India turned away patients except for emergency cases on Saturday, as medical professionals went on strike for 24 hours in protest against the rape and murder of a doctor in the eastern city of Kolkata. More than 1 million doctors were expected to join the strike, which paralysed medical services across the world's most populous nation. All the doctors, nurses and medical staff work for the welfare of their patients, she says. But we cannot handle violence or threats towards us or our children. We will not tolerate this. The government urged doctors to return to duties in the public interest. In a statement, it said a committee would be set up to improve protection for healthcare professionals. Patients queued up at hospitals, some unaware before they set out that strikes would interfere with their care. A 31-year-old trainee doctor was raped and murdered last week inside the medical college in Kolkata where she worked. Her killing triggered nationwide protests and drew parallels to the notorious gang rape and murder of a 23-year-old student on a moving bus in New Delhi in 2012. Outside the RG Kar Medical College, where the crime took place, a heavy police presence was seen on Saturday, while the hospital premises were deserted, according to the ANI news agency.
And that's it for the week ahead this Sunday afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us. The news continues at the top of the hour right here on SABC News Channel 404. From myself, Sebenzile Nkambule, and the rest of the team from Studio 11. Until next time, take care.